For centuries, the story of the Americas was one of total isolation. We were taught that the vast Atlantic and Pacific Oceans were like walls, sealing off two continents until European explorers finally breached them. The Americas were seen as a silent world, cut off from the rest of humanity, waiting for history to begin. But the Earth itself is telling a different story. New discoveries in archaeology, genetics, and even language are tearing down that old myth of isolation. We're now seeing the pre-Columbian Americas, not as a lonely island, but as a vibrant center of seafaring skill. This is the story of the ancient sea peoples, the forgotten navigators who read the stars, rode the currents, and connected continents long before history even knew their names. To begin, we look west, to the Pacific. For a long time, the Clovis First theory was the only story told. It claimed that the first Americans walked across the Bering Land Bridge, hunting mammoths through an ice-free corridor. But a discovery at Montevideo, Chile, turned that timeline on its head. Humans were living there over 14,500 years ago, long before that corridor was even open. So how did they get there so fast? They didn't walk. They rode. This is the Kelp Highway hypothesis. It suggests that ancient Asian seafarers hugged the coastline of the North Pacific. They followed a massive, continuous belt of kelp forests that stretched all the way from Japan, along the coast of Alaska, and down to South America. This kelp ecosystem was a floating supermarket, full of fish, sea urchins, and otters. It also acted as a natural breakwater, calming the rough seas for small boats. Imagine them, thousands of years ago, gliding in skin-covered boats through the misty shores of the Pacific Northwest. These weren't people accidentally drifting at sea. They were explorers. They populated thousands of miles of coastline at a speed land migration could never achieve, leaving behind clues that are now mostly swallowed by the rising seas of the post-ice age. They are the first ghosts of the American coast. Now let's jump forward in time to the coast of Southern California, home of the Chumash people. They had a piece of technology that was unique in North America. The tamal. This was a soam-plank canoe. Unlike the dugout canoes their neighbors used, which were just hollowed-out logs, the tamal was engineered. They used redwood planks, shaped them, drilled holes, and sewed them together with cordage. Then they sealed the seams with a mix of natural tar and pine pitch. This wasn't just a boat for fishing near the shore. It was a vessel capable of traveling on the deep ocean. And here's where one of history's most tantalizing whispers begins. The design of the tamal is incredibly similar to the soam-plank canoes of the Polynesians, who were thousands of miles away across the open Pacific. Even the Chumash word for this canoe, tamal, sounds a lot like the Polynesian word for the wood used in their canoes, kumala. Is this just a wild coincidence? Or is it an echo of contact? Is it possible that Polynesian wayfinders, the greatest navigators the world has ever known, actually reached the California coast? Ocean currents show it's plausible. If they did meet, they would have traded more than just goods. They would have traded ideas, engineering blueprints shared on a sandy beach, forever changing the destiny of a coastal people. If the tamal is a whisper of contact, then the sweet potato is a shout. The sweet potato is native to the Americas, but when Captain Cook arrived in Polynesia in the 1700s, he was stunned to find the islanders were already growing it. And it gets even more specific. The Polynesian word for sweet potato is kumala, which is almost identical to the word used in the Andes of South America, kumara. For the sweet potato to travel thousands of miles across the Pacific, somebody had to carry it. There are only two options. Either South Americans sailed west to Polynesia, or Polynesians sailed east, landed in South America, and brought the tuber back home with them. Recent genetic studies have found Polynesian DNA markers in certain South American tribes, and in ancient human remains. This wasn't a story of conquest. It was a story of connection. It paints a picture of the Pacific, not as a barrier, but as a great blue continent, a place where ancient mariners navigated by the stars and the feel of the water, creating trade routes that modern history is only now starting to recognize. Let's turn our gaze now to the frigid waters of the North Atlantic. Along the coast from Maine all the way up to Labrador, Canada, we find evidence of a culture called the Maritime Archaic. They were sometimes known as the Red Paint People because they used red ochre powder in their burials. Flourishing as far back as 7,000 years ago, these were not simple hunter-gatherers. They were hunters of the deep ocean. In their ancient fire pits, Archaeologists have found the beaks of swordfish. Swordfish are deep-water predators. You can't catch them from the beach. To hunt them, you need seaworthy boats, harpoons, and the incredible courage to travel far beyond the sight of land. The burial mounds they've built also look surprisingly similar to mounds found in northern Europe from the same time period, while the controversial Solutrean hypothesis, which suggests Ice Age Europeans crossed the Atlantic, is still heavily debated. The Maritime Archaic people prove one thing for sure. The North Atlantic was a realm of mastery, not fear. They were navigating icy currents and hunting whales thousands of years before the Vikings ever set sail. They were the Vikings' unknown predecessors, masters of the chill fog and the gray wave. Deep inside the American continent, the echoes of the sea still ring loud in the trade networks of the ancient Mississippian and Hopewell cultures. In the great earthen mounds of the Midwest, hundreds of miles from any ocean, archaeologists have dug up shark teeth, marine shells from the Gulf of Mexico, and even barracuda jaws. The vast network of the Mississippi River and its tributaries acted like arteries, connecting the heartland directly to the sea. But the connection may go even deeper. There are striking similarities in art and architecture between the great mound cities of the American South, like Cahokia, and the civilizations of Mesoamerica, like the Maya. Proving direct contact is difficult, but it's very likely the Gulf of Mexico was a kind of American Mediterranean. Maya traders were famous for their large, seagoing canoes. They even impressed Christopher Columbus. It's probable they skirted the Gulf Coast. Did they trade exotic feathers and cacao for the rich copper deposits of the Great Lakes? The way these goods were distributed suggests a massive system of trade where the sea was the main highway, connecting different worlds. The ancient Americans weren't static or isolated. They were cosmopolitan, aware of distant lands and foreign riches brought to them by the people of the sea. The history of the Americas is usually told through its land-based empires to Aztecs. On their island city, the Inca high in the mountains, the Sioux on the vast plains, but all along the edges of the map, the coastlines were alive, from the kelp forests of the Pacific Northwest to the icy fjords of Labrador, and through the warm currents of the Caribbean. Ancient America was surrounded by expert mariners. They were the sea peoples of the New World. They understood the tides, they mapped the stars, and they stitched the entire hemisphere together with invisible threads of wake and wave. We are only now beginning to truly hear their story. As ice melts and shorelines shift, revealing ancient tools and timbers, the long silence is finally breaking. The ocean is not empty. It is full of echoes. Thanks for watching. If you found this journey into the past as fascinating as I did, don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the notification bell for more stories that challenge what we think we know.